Hey there, everyone. Jeremy Plonk here from First Bet and Express Bet. Proud to host the It's Official podcast created by Jeff Siegel. And we're going to take on 5 hot topics this week. It doesn't feel very hot. The weather has changed, obviously, and the winds of change are in place in the racing industry right now as racing in Kentucky switches to Turfway Park on Wednesday this week for the winter season there in Florence. Then we also have on the West Coast, Los Alamitos opening their fall meet, the Starlet and the Los Al Futurity races that we'll look forward to at Los Al coming up over the next month until the start of the season at Santa Anita on December 26th. So Southern California's racing switches venues from Del Mar to Los Alamitos this Friday. And a week from Friday, it'll be Oaklawn Park opening their long stand that runs all the way through May in the Kentucky Derby. So looking forward to the Oaklawn racing action getting underway a week from this Friday. So a lot of change in the racing calendar, but some things stay the same, including our format here in the podcast. So with the It's Official podcast, without further ado, and we'll talk about further ado in just a bit, let's go to our 5 hot topics this week. First up, as it is each and every week, the Goosebump Award. Which race or horse got us most excited, the most thrilling finish, or the most impressive performance? The one we're going to remember. I'm going to go back to Churchill Downs. Their Stars of Tomorrow card on Saturday, where in the stakes race for the 2-year-old fillies, the Goldenrod expected good things out of Bella Ballerina, and several top players in this race all delivered.
As they come for the top of the stretch, Let Me Count the Ways has lost the lead. Bella Ballerina first off the turn. Let Me Count the Ways back into second. But here comes Atropa. Here comes Life of Joy. Here comes Just Singing. They're deep in the final furlong. And Bella Ballerina's kicked away by 3. Atropa with a fast finish. Just Singing with a fast finish. Bella Ballerina holds on. Bella Ballerina.
Not the most dominant victory, certainly an exciting finish, and I love when the top horses in a race deliver their A games, and that's what we got in that race. Atropa, the runner-up, ran outstanding in there, but the winner, Bella Ballerina, really the one to keep an eye on moving forward because she is a half-sister to Pretty Mischievous, who, of course, in her 3-year-old campaign, won the Kentucky Oaks, won the Acorn, won the Test Stakes, was just a tremendous filly during her 3-year-old season. Interestingly enough, Pretty Mischievous, also trained by Brendan Walsh for Godolphin, the same family. She was 3rd in the Goldenrod Stakes as a 2-year-old. I think maybe as a 2-turn prospect, we're looking at a horse like Bella Ballerina by Street Sense, who could really, really be effective going around the 2 turns. And we saw it there, holding on and lasting. But again, good horses were closing on the back end of that race. I'm looking forward to what's probably a fairgrounds campaign. That's been the Brendan Walsh MO with these good 3-year-old fillies in the spring most years. So I would expect we're going to see Bella Ballerina down at the fairgrounds. Cherie DeVoe probably has the fairgrounds with Atropa as well. We could see those two in several matchups, the Rachel Alexandra down there, and of course the Fairgrounds Oaks, the big races during the course of the 3-year-old season. But really looking forward to seeing Bella Ballerina go on and see what she might become in here. She's as good as her older sister. She's set up for a really big campaign. Again, a 3-time winner at 3 was Pretty Mischievous. So our Goosebump Award this week goes to Bella Ballerina, winner of the Goldenrod Stakes at Churchill Downs. Let's go to our second topic this week, and some freshmen are making their case for the 3-year-old season on the boys' side. Early Derby trail. Can we use words like that? Why not? We're talking about Strategic Risk winning down in the Florida Sire Stakes at Gulfstream Park, and Further Ado winning the Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill. Let's start with Florida because this one was a dominant performance, stretching out in distance for Strategic Risk.
Zayas is working overtime on Kozalane, and he's not responding. Roger that Dana, the leader. From the outside, here's Castellano on Strategic Risk, taking up the slack second through 3/4 in 1:12 and 3. Less than a quarter of a mile to come in the In Reality, and Strategic Risk has powered past to take the lead. Off the turn and the stretch drive and the colors of John Oxley. It's Strategic Risk, the son of Noble Bird, by 5, by 6, and still moving away. Strategic Risk blows the doors off the field. He wins the In Reality by almost 10 lengths.
9 lengths, the official margin there. Pete Aiello on the mic, and What a performance there by a horse who's had some experience now. This was the 5th career start for Strategic Risk, a Mark Casse trainee. Had gone long once prior on turf, but this was the first time going long on dirt. And the pedigree by Noble Bird out of an Fleet Alex mare made this one look on, average winning distance. If you look at the Brisk figures, this looked like the horse most likely in this race in the In Reality Stakes to handle the 2-turn stretch out. Last time out was outrun when 3rd in the Affirmed division of the Florida Sire Stakes by Kozolite, who was the logical favorite in the betting for the In Reality. But when you stretch these horses out from 1 turn to 2, things change. And certainly the change really worked out well for Strategic Risk under Javier Castellano. Where will we see Strategic Risk as a 3-year-old? Well, I would assume Gulfstream Park and Tampa Bay Downs make a lot of sense. Mark Casse will support the fairgrounds and also the Oaklawn circuits, but you would think this looks like a horse who, Florida bred, could be really well set to run at Tampa Bay Downs. I think something like the Sam F. Davis for Strategic Risk might be a good next stop because, again, he'll be leaving Florida bred competition and going into open company. Sam F. Davis, usually a decent race, but not overly hammerheads, in that lineup for that race. So I think that would be a good spot for him. You could stay at Gulfstream Park, but you don't want to turn back to the Mucho Macho Man stakes around 1 turn. You want to keep this horse going 2 turns. So if you wait for the Holy Bull with Strategic Risk, you're going to take on a lot stronger competition than you would if you go in the Sam F. Davis. So if I'm running the campaign for Strategic Risk, a very impressive winner of the Florida Sire Stakes, a final division there, the In Reality, I would wait and go to the Tampa Bay race and look forward to the Sam F. Davis and then maybe a Tampa Bay Derby. We see that with Casse. He likes to run his horses, I think Flame Away and some others in recent years in that kind of path. And this looks like a Tampa Bay Downs kind of horse to me. Strategic Risk, one to keep an eye on as we go from age 2 to 3. He was the first freshman to make his case on Saturday. The second was Further Ado. Further Ado was heavily favored in the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes at Churchill Downs. Why? Because he was coming off a 20-length victory in his maiden breaker at Keeneland. He was absolutely awesome around 2 turns at Keeneland, ran a hole in the wind that day. Could he live up to that kind of performance? Do you want him to live up to that kind of performance in the next start in Stakes Company? Probably not. I mean, if you're looking long-term with a horse like that off such a big maiden breaker, I don't know if you want to run that kind of race right back in Stakes Company in November. You either kind of lay off and come back in the spring and get a couple races into them that way. And if you're going to run here in the fall, you want to get some education out of them and don't leave everything on the track. And it was kind of mission accomplished, if you will. Further Ado, certainly not dominant by 20, but really nice performance here by stalking the pace and going on with it. Here's his victory in the Kentucky Jockey Club for Brad Cox.
As they hit the top of the stretch, Soldier and Diplomat is off the turn with the lead. Further Ado is now set down for the drive, and these two 1-2 with a furlong to go. Soldier and Diplomat digs in grimly. Further Ado, having to work for it, comes up alongside. Farther back, Universe into third. 100 yards to go, and Further Ado has overhauled Soldier and Diplomat. Further Ado does it again, this time by 2. Universe rallied stoutly to get up into second. Then it was either Soldier and Diplomat or Very Connected.
Let you see the gallop out there because Universe, the runner-up, galloped out extremely well on the inside. So maybe this is one for Kenny McPeek to keep an eye on. Where will McPeek go during the spring? Certainly he'll have horses at Fairgrounds and at Oaklawn Park. And McPeek's better 3-year-old colts, it seemed like, kind of take that Oaklawn path a lot of years. And maybe with the Fairgrounds purses and the Oaklawn purses as strong as they are, there'll be no reason to kind of get out of that region of the country in the early part of the season. Of course, McPeek will always be a guy who's going to look at the bluegrass in April at Keeneland with some of his better 3-year-olds. So if you're starting to look at a campaign for some of these horses, Brad Cox with Further Ado, he's got to be happy enough with what he got out of this race. He'll also look at those Fairgrounds and Oaklawn races. You'd have to think. Remember, Further Ado is owned by Spendthrift Farm, who also owns Ted Naffy, who's the favorite for the Kentucky Derby based on some future wagers we'll take a look at in just a little bit. But when you've got Ted Naffy and Further Ado, you're going to keep them separated. Spendthrift Sheriff is going to tell Todd Pletcher to keep Ted Noffey away from Brad Cox's runner in here, Further Ado, and maybe they'll meet in the Kentucky Derby, but I'm certain that they would not meet before that. So you figure Ted Noffey's headed to Florida, and he's going to take that campaign down there, whether he comes back in the Holy Bull or the Fountain of Youth, and then finish up with the Florida Derby or the Bluegrass Stakes. And then for Further Ado, you figure Brad Cox, maybe something like the Risen Star, maybe a race like the Lecompton come back sooner and then take time off and just have the later prep with the Louisiana Derby if they want to go that route. Of course, Oaklawn's got a long series of races from the Smarty Jones to the Southwest to the Rebel to the Arkansas Derby to pick from. So a lot of different options. Further Ado should be headed down that way. And I think we're probably going to see him again against the horse who ran second in there, Universe. Universe ran very well in there for Kenny McPeak. Fourth career start for Universe, a horse who was third in the Champagne, second in the Street Sense. That was a two-turn race in the Street Sense, came back now and winning or runner-up here in the Kentucky Jockey Club around 2 turns. Universe certainly by Global Campaign out of a quality road mare. Looks like a horse who wants some distance, and he is one to keep an eye on, I think, Universe heading in to these 3-year-old races to come. But top 2 in there, Further Ado, Universe, both impressive to me heading out of the Kentucky Jockey Club. We had mentioned some of the Kentucky Derby future wager odds. We've got those to look at now as we talk about some of these sophomores. Kentucky Derby future wager was offered pool number 2 last week through Thanksgiving through Sunday at 6 p.m. So the results of the Kentucky Jockey Club and the races around the country from the weekend were known at the time when this pool closed on Sunday at 6 p.m. All other 3-year-olds closed at 2-1, which I think is a rather generous price this time of year. I know there are 40 individual wagering interests, but I would expect that to be closer to odds on this far out. Ted Noffey, the top individual bet getter, if you will. He's at a 7-1 price. Obviously, way too short to take a price like that on a horse this far out from a gambling standpoint. But a lot of people, obviously, voting with their dollars, putting it in that Ted Noffey is the horse to beat going into the winter for the Kentucky Derby. Further Ado at 13. Maybe he would have been lower with a more impressive victory, but certainly 13-1 makes him a clear second individual choice in the Kentucky Derby future wager. Napoleon Solo, the horse who just ran off the screen in the Champagne Stakes, then we didn't see him for the Breeders' Cup. We'll see where Napoleon Solo shows up during the 3-year-old campaign for Chad Summers. Boyd for Bob Baffert was a winner on the undercard at Churchill Downs on Saturday on that Stars of Tomorrow card at Churchill. Boyd at 22-1. Paladin is running this weekend in the Remsen Stakes. He's coming off a DQ put-up victory in his career debut for Chad Brown. Then you've got Brandt for Bob Baffert, Incredible in there at 28. Mr. AP 29 for Serin. Englishman 30-1 for Cherie DeVoe. And Universe, the horse who just ran second in the Kentucky Jockey Club at 32-1. As for those prices, they're all too short for me this far out. I want 50-1 or more, even in the next pool that we're going to see in January for the Kentucky Derby future wager, because a lot of those horses are still going to be at least 2 preps away from the Kentucky Derby, sub 3 away from the Derby by the time that we see that January future wager roll around. For me, I went 50-1 that far out. Remember, on the first Saturday in May, you can always get some really good-looking horses at double-digit odds a couple minutes to post time. So that's a look at some of the freshmen looking to make an early statement towards the 3-year-old trail. Another one I want to mention, a horse on the undercard on Saturday at Churchill, another Kenny McPeak trainee. Again, he's got Universe coming back off that second-place finish now in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Prior on that card in a race 8 maiden special weight, a Maxfield colt named Liberty National for Kenny McPeak ran away by 4 1/4 lengths. It was only 8/100ths of a second slower than Further Ado and Company ran a little bit later on the card in the Kentucky Jockey Club. So Liberty National ran very well on the undercard Saturday at Churchill. Maybe that's one to keep an eye on if you're looking for a horse at a little bit bigger price heading towards the 3-year-old campaign. Now, coming up this weekend, we mentioned the Remsen Stakes. We'll have Paladin and others, a full field in that one. We'll have some handicapping for you at Express Bet and First Bet. Myself and Scott Shapiro will look at some of these races over the course of the next few days. And of course, on Friday's podcast, the First Call podcast, Scott and I will certainly be handicapping the Remsen Stakes, and we'll give you a more handicapping-centric look at the Remsen on Friday. Also this weekend, you've got the inaugural stakes at Tampa Bay Downs, the Maryland Juvenile Championship. So 3 races for the 2-year-olds about to turn 3, maybe horses that would potentially be on the Derby or Preakness path in 2026. Now, talking 3-year-olds this year about to turn 4, that's our next topic, and we're kind of teasing it out right now. More for age 4. Who else might we see back as 4-year-olds? We know the connections of Baeza said he'll be back for his 4-year-old campaign. We know the connections of journalism said he'll also be back for a 4-year-old season. Last week, Bill Mott threw a nugget out on FanDuel TV saying that he hasn't heard yet that Sovereignty won't be back. So we're kind of crossing our fingers and hoping perhaps we'll see Sovereignty as a 4-year-old. Maybe some news will break on that in the coming days. Certainly you would expect some kind of note on Sovereignty and decision to be made on him in short time. I mean, if he's going to get back to the races in 2026, I mean, certainly how they want to campaign him would almost have to include the Dubai World Cup, given the connections of Gaddafi and the ownership there. You would think they want to have him in their signature, 8-figure race. So I would expect Dubai World Cup in late March, 1st of April. I'm not sure where it falls on the calendar in 2026, but last week of March, first weekend of April, you got to think the Dubai World Cup would be in the plans if they are going to run Sovereignty back as a 4-year-old. Now, a couple horses who ran this weekend, 3-year-olds looking to turn 4 here in the next month, are horses that kind of, lift the spirits and lift that division. It's going to see a lot of graduation, right? Fierceness, Sierra Leone, those great 3-year-olds from 2 years ago that were 4 this year and ran so well, back 1, 2, 3 in the Breeders' Cup, Forever Young et al. You've got the horses that need to replace them in that handicap division, and some pretty good 4-year-olds made a case for that this past weekend. One of which was Magnitude. Magnitude and Chunk of Gold, the 3-year-olds, led the way down the stretch in the Dubai World Cup winner hit show. Split them in the exacta in the Clark handicap.
They're off the turn. Magnitude powers up to grab the lead, but Chunk of Gold is ready to fight on. Chunk of Gold and Magnitude, the 2 3-year-olds, heading to the final furlong with the veteran Hit Show trying to pick them up late. Final 16th now. Chunk of Gold running the race of his life. Magnitude in between. Hit Show's trying to nail him right on the money. Down to the wire. Magnitude, magnificent in the Clark, defeating Hit Show in Ultra Game. Chunk of Gold.
It's a pretty good measuring stick when a 3-year-old beats Hit Show. He's not a superstar. I know he's got the big win on his ledger in the Dubai World Cup. That was a race almost won by Mixto. And we know he's not one of the really top upper echelon handicap horses from California as well. So it wasn't a good year for the Dubai World Cup, other than the fact that the 3rd place finisher in there, of course, was Forever Young. He was coming off a bounce effort for sure after a huge race in Saudi Arabia against Romantic Warrior, the superstar from Hong Kong. But it's a good measuring stick when you can run against Hit Show over a track in which he's been very effective throughout his career at Churchill Downs, and to beat him was a good sign for Magnitude at 1 mile and an 1/8 in the Clark handicap. Magnitude's a horse who's going to head to New Orleans for the winter. I would expect Chunk of Gold to head there as well, and these are horses that were on the Louisiana Derby trail at 3. They'd be on the New Orleans handicap path, the New Orleans Classic, I believe it's called now. You'd have to look forward to seeing those horses in those kind of races. The Oaklawn handicap would be a great spot for both of those horses coming up in the spring at Oaklawn as well. You could certainly make both of those races, New Orleans Classic and Oaklawn handicap, and that would be a good campaign for those runners. Then, of course, you've got the big one at Churchill Downs and the Stephen Foster after the Derby and on to the rest of the campaign. But these 3-year-olds turning 4 are going to add some good depth to the division, which probably needs it. Now, one of the 4-year-olds turning 5 next year is Forever Young. He's expected to be back. A light campaign Forever Young again. Saudi, Dubai, a prep, Breeders' Cup Classic, maybe another 4-race campaign for him. We'll see what they end up doing with him in Japan. But his follow-up horse, remember 2 years ago, was Forever Young, barely missing in the 3-way photo in the Kentucky Derby. His follow-up this year in the Kentucky Derby was a horse named Luxor Cafe, who I really liked going into the race, and I thought he had a big chance in there. Didn't have the greatest of trips. He fired okay in the Kentucky Derby. Well, Luxor Cafe's still going at it, and he's running this Saturday in the race that used to be called the Japan Cup Dirt. It's the Champions Stakes, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back on dirt and what he might have as a 4-year-old campaign. Since the Kentucky Derby, we saw Luxor Cafe finish 3rd in his return race, and then last time out dropped in the Grade 3 company to prep for this Champions race, and he looked awfully good. Let's take a look over in Japan. Here he is last time out, winning the Musashino Stakes. turn of foot, Luxor Cafe, that had me excited going into the Kentucky Derby. We'll see him again this weekend. First Bet and Express Bet simulcast players can watch and wager on that race from Japan coming up this weekend, the Champions Cup. So you can check that out. Post time will be overnight Saturday into Sunday morning. So Luxor Cafe back in action, a 3-year-old who showed a lot of promise earlier this year and is coming back into hand at the end of his 3-year-old campaign, taking on top older horses in Japan, the best dirt horses on that in that country, on the island nation. We will see. Luxor Cafe, could he be a horse who comes out of there and becomes a Saudi Cup, a Dubai World Cup type player as a 4-year-old, and then maybe back to the U.S.? Be exciting to see him and get 2 big horses from Japan, perhaps, with, of course, Forever Young staying in training to age 5. So a lot of 3-year-olds turning 4. Will we see more for 4? That was the headline, and that's the big question. But, of course, the 4-year-old everybody wants to see in 2026, potentially, would be Sovereignty. Waiting on word what Godolphin, Bill Mott, and company are going to do with this year's Kentucky Derby, Belmont, and Travers Stakes winner, and probably no question, I think now after the Breeders' Cup Classic win by Forever Young, the Horse of the Year favorite, Sovereignty, for 2025. Let's move on to our next topic this week on the It's Official podcast, and we're going to go off track here just a little bit. The question in the headline is, who wears the pants? Well, we had a situation at Aqueduct on Sunday where the jockeys, after race number 1 on the card, refused to ride. They canceled the rest of the program, leaving track management high and dry, leaving horsemen high and dry, owners, trainers, grooms, people who had been working to get horses prepped and ready for a race day, outriders, valets, everybody who would have been part of that race day program sent home after the first race because the jockeys, well, they had a few issues with management. To quote Kendrick Carmouche, who's the representative for the Jockeys Guild of the New York Riders, they, meaning the track management, don't respect us. They don't care about our feelings. They don't care about making us feel like we're the head of the sport because we are the jocks. We do make the show go on. That was his quote. The controversy, according to reporting from DRF's David Grenig, involved an assistant clerk of scales who was sent home after the first race for refusing to take on new assignments, which basically the clerk of scales checks the weights on all jockeys before and after races to make sure that they're carrying the correct weights in races. The assistant clerk of scales, his new duties were to include, get this, recording the weights by hand, as well as the computer program that they had been using. So for that and the refusal to record them by hand, track management apparently sent the assistant clerk of scales home. That sent the jockeys into an uproar, and everyone's feelings got hurt, and they canceled and walked out on the rest of the card. Again, leaving in the lurch all the patrons who came out to the racetrack, all the bettors and handicappers who put hours in the handicapping the card that had a pick 6 carryover towards it. They ran the first race on the card and then canceled after the first, and a real power play trying to, show who wears the pants. Now, if you ask me in horse racing where the jockeys rank on the totem pole of importance, they're on the pole, but they've got to look up quite a bit. I mean, jockeys are journeymen, independent contractors, self-employed. They are not part of the organization of the racetrack management itself. To me, you start at the top with the racetrack owners and operators. Without them, none of this goes on. It's their real estate. It's their licenses. It's their associations with the state and the governments and the taxes that they pay, the purse accounts that they gather and distribute, right? I mean, without the track management, none of that happens. So to me, the track management is at the top of the totem pole, and for the jockeys or anybody else to kind of play power play to that just is disingenuous. And so, look, track management is not out of bounds in criticism for sure as well. And I'm certainly not being a homer towards, any particular organization or not, and not even to this specific case. But without them, you don't have anything. Because look, if you have a track organization, and you see this in some smaller countries, you can have your own horse population, right? You can breed horses. You can have association owners and trainers. You can have association jockeys that are paid by the track management. That's not the way we do it here in the United States, but that wouldn't preclude a racetrack from owning a racetrack operation from going on, taking bets, making money for the state, paying taxes to the state and such. I mean, so there are a lot of, down the totem pole, there are a lot of positions that could be changed or removed and not affect the overall product as much as the top of the totem pole to me, which is obviously to me the track operators in all of this. Now you could go back and say if the breeders don't breed horses, we don't have horses. That's fine. Again, track operators can hire people who are experts in mating and create and breed their own horses and create an entire industry based on that. You have to have the track operation going on. You have to have the relationship with the state, the licenses to conduct the business the way that you do. And so to me, if the track operator comes along and says this is the rule, as long as the rule isn't something that's completely egregious and that you're adamantly against for personal or professional reasons, there really shouldn't be any kind of dispute in here. If that's their rule, that's their rule. You may not like it, but it's kind of, the way it's played in any profession. Your employer makes the rules, and as long as they're somewhat reasonable. I mean, Carmouche cited things like family and friends not being allowed in the jockey's room as a show of disrespect to the riders. I mean, there are plenty of professional sports organizations that would not allow the same thing to happen in their locker rooms as well. And when you talk about the integrity of the game, who comes in and out of a particular room, like a sacred thing like the jockey's room prior to a race or after a race, when you're looking at the integrity of the sport and the gambling that's going on, the fewer people that are involved in contact with the jockey during the course of the race day, the better. I mean, for the integrity of the sport. So get down to the paddock, talk to the trainers and owners that you're riding for in that particular race, get back, change your silks, come back down and do it again and talk to your next client as you're an independent contractor working throughout the day. To me, that's the way it should happen. And I really don't have any sympathetic ear at all towards the riders in this particular plight. Now, apparently, again, this is something that could have been worked out on an off day, a dark day in racing, after the races one day, sit down with the management and talk about, to just pull up and cancel a card on a weekend. At a time when, the NYRA racing, it's not the marquee racing in the country, but there's not a lot of great racing going on a Sunday in late November like this. They're very much in the spotlight from a national standpoint of simulcast percentage and percentage of the rake and take throughout the course of the country. So this really hit the track. It hit them below the belt in my estimation, and just was uncalled for on Sunday to do it mid-card like that after the card had begun. So that's our fourth topic this week. Who wears the pants? To me, it's the track management. Sorry, jocks, can't side with you on this one. And from a standpoint of cancellations, this is yet another line of almost comical cancellations that we've seen at Aqueduct over the past year or so. This one here on December 1st, the jockey's feelings, the reason for the cancellation. I titled this, "The Dog Ate My Homework." These are the bad excuses for not showing up for work here. Car shows, loud music. Remember that one back March 30th? There was a car show in the parking lot for the casino that runs Aqueduct. The music was so loud that they couldn't run the races that day, so they canceled the card due to loud music in the parking lot. And then, of course, just about 14 months ago, back on October 11th of 2024, they were doing some roof work, and the fumes from the tar on the roof and the paint were so bad that it infiltrated the press box in the steward's booth, and it wasn't safe for the stewards to adjudicate the races because of the fumes coming off of the roof on a race day, which would not be the best of times, I would think, to be tarring the roof while the races are going on. So look, there's a lot of, cynicism, obviously, in this particular topic, but it just goes to show that if there's a way to screw things up, entities will find a way to screw them up sometimes. Let's get our heads on straight and hope that 2026 doesn't have these kind of nonsensical cancellations, not just at Aqueduct, but around the country for sure. Let's go to our fifth and final topic. As we do each and every week, we get back on schedule here with our Stars of Tomorrow. Of course, they had the Stars of Tomorrow card last Saturday at Churchill Downs, up and down the line with 2-year-olds to watch. And boy, did we find one in race number 12, a maiden special weight. Brad Cox won 5 on the card, including this one. Cannoneer. Circle this one for 2026.
In the corner nicely there. They're off the turn. Cannoneer in front by 3, heading for the 8th pole. Cornwall Boss trying to muster up a late challenge. Associated has given way. Dragonis has given way. Cannoneer has done none of that. In fact, Cannoneer is finishing full of run. Big time strides to the wire. Cannoneer crushed them.
Cannoneer, he sounds a little bit like Cannonade and Cavanier, and if he's a combination of both, he's got a lot of Kentucky Derby dreams ahead of him. $1.7 million purchase here. This is a horse who won his 7-furlong race here in 121.63, 7.25 length victory in this particular spot. He's by Into Mischief out of Catch the Moon. That makes him a half to Gervin, a Louisiana Derby and Haskell winner. Also a half to Midnight Bourbon, runner-up in the Preakness, runner-up in the Saudi or in the Travers, third in the Saudi Cup, made over $3 million. So this is a very, very well-bred Into Mischief in here for Brad Cox, Stone Street Stables et al. Star of Tomorrow, Cannoneer. Where might we see that one show up next year? Again, Brad Cox is going to have to separate Further Ado, Cannoneer, and his cast of characters headed towards Oaklawn and also towards Fairgrounds this winter. Probably those two locales. This year was the year where he had Tapan Street and some other horses down at Gulfstream Park. So I'll be curious to see if Brad Cox goes back to Gulfstream with some of these good 3-year-olds. Again, he would have to run the Spendthrift horse against Ted Nafi, so he's not going to go to Florida, you would think for sure, with the Spendthrift farm horse Further Ado, but maybe Cannoneer would be a horse that he looks at in Florida. We'll see how he wants to separate his charges, but again, Brad Cox will be very visible on 3 fronts next year, including Cannoneer, one to watch in our Star of Tomorrow. Let's review the 5 topics on It's Official this week. Our Goosebump Award was Bella Ballerina, the half to Pretty Mischievous, Kentucky Oaks winner from a year ago, winning the Goldenrod Stakes and a good finish with a Tropa. Our freshmen who made an early case this week were Strategic Risk, winning the Florida Sire Stakes by 9 lengths in the In Reality division around 2 turns. Further Ado backed up his 20-length win at Keeneland with a 1 3/4 length win in the Kentucky Jockey Club, where Universe galloped out really nice for Kenny McPeak and is also one to watch. Kentucky Derby Future Wager pool number 2. The results are in. Further Ado, the 7-1 individual favorite for that. More for age 4. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with Sovereignty, the expected horse of the year. A decision on his 4-year-old campaign could be coming up soon, or retirement. We know Journalism and Baeza are back. Magnitude won the Clark in a very good performance, beating the Dubai World Cup winner in that one. Magnitude will be headed to Fairgrounds for his 4-year-old season. Luxor Cafe, a good-looking 3-year-old from Japan who came over for this year's Kentucky Derby, will run this Saturday night into Sunday morning. We'll see him in the Champions Cup in Japan, the former Japan Cup third. We'll see maybe he could be another 4-year-old to add to the mix next season. Who wears the pants in the dispute between NYRA, New York Racing Association, Aqueduct Racetrack, and the jockeys? I'm going to say we give this one to the track management. And for our Stars of Tomorrow, Cannoneer for Brad Cox, an impressive 7 1/4 length victor in a maiden special weight on the Stars of Tomorrow card at Churchill Downs. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel, the creator of this show, and I say so. That's the way we play the game here each and every week. And we'll do it again next week with 5 more hot topics as we get further into the month of December. Again, a big week next week with the opening at Oaklawn on Friday. This coming week's track openings include Turfway Park on Wednesday. Tomorrow, we record this podcast each Tuesday. Wednesday this week, Turfway Park will open. Friday this week, Los Alamitos will open their season as well. So enjoy the racing this weekend. Between now and then, get some handicapping in. That NYRA card for Saturday is already drawn. NYRA also has a $70,000 plus carryover for when racing resumes on Thursday in New York. So on behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week. We'll talk to you Friday when we come back for the First Call podcast.